Good morning. Welcome to Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Susan Sluter, and I almost lost my script. I printed this sucker out 14 pages, okay? I would have been devastated if I'd lost it. All right, we are excited to welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're so glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining us in person or online, whether you've been here whether this is your first time, or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Of course, if you're like me, you don't remember yesterday, so. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths and of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome among us. As a community, we also welcome the sharing of joys, sorrows, and concerns. You are welcome to fill out a joys and sorrows slip on the table near the Welcome Center and also in the pockets of the chairs. I'm not sure they're in the pockets, but you can look. And on the joys and sorrows table in front of the sanctuary, or you're welcome to light a candle, okay? Whatever you want to do. This can be done at any time before the service or in service from the beginning through the offertory. Now we have a few announcements today. After service, there are a couple of fun activities. We always have fun activities. First, there is a trunk or treat in the side parking lot from 11:45 to 12:30. Everyone is invited to take part. Costumes are not required. Second, buy pumpkins at our pumpkin patch fundraiser in front of the church. You can also go online to sign up as a volunteer to work the pumpkin patch for 2 to 4 hours between now and October 31st. And from what I read, we need volunteers. For adults between the ages of 18 and 35, there will be a pumpkin carving this Thursday, starting at 7 p.m. here at Horizon. More details for all of these events are in your order of service and its inserts. Now we have a couple more announcements.
I'm NC Miller. In your order of service, there's an insert about the Hidden History Tour, Hidden DFW African American History Tour next Saturday morning. I have good news, bad news, good news. Good news, several of us are going on that tour. Bad news, it's sold out. Good news, we'll reschedule again in the spring and have another opportunity. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Not to harp on the pumpkins, but everybody say hi to Stanley.
Hi, Stanley!
See, Stanley has a nose. So Stanley is our mascot for the 2023 Horizon UU Pumpkin Patch. It runs from 11:30 in the morning until 7:30, more like dark because that's around 7 now, at night. From now through Halloween, there is beautiful little pumpkins that are like $1 and $2. We have bigger pumpkins that are about 2 or 3. So we have some fascinating heirloom pumpkins and warty goblins that are $5. We have a beautiful swan gourd that are $8. And then we have what we call the bulk pumpkins that are various prices depending on their size, but they don't go above $20. And if you want to sign up, I have a sign-up list, paper sign-up list out in the festival hall in case you're not web happy. And lastly, Stanley says, buy more pumpkins.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Talbot. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the coordinating officer of Denton Cups and a polytheistic witch, boo, if that matters. This morning's service is based on the 3 harvest festivals of modern paganism. Lughnasadh, or the grain harvest, autumn equinox, or the apple harvest, and Samhain, the end of harvest. And our call to worship this morning comes from Kisler Seret, and it is called A Prayer for the Fall Equinox, which is in the middle of those celebrations and not really a beginning, but hey, balance is between the two, and it seemed like a good place to start. Bright is the harvest, dwindling the sun. His days of bright ruling are ending. We stand on the edge of the sun's youth and age. This is the time when the fire of midsummer's glory wanes and grows old in the west. The festival of the west, celebration of the harvest, feast of the dying sun. I now invite Susan Schuster to come up and light the chalice for us while I read you these words. Fire plays a central part in the harvest festival and folklore that have given us these 3 Sabbats this time of year. A Scottish witch I know has termed it pulling the roots from a dying age, but which I think is better referred to as looking back so we can move forward. Today's chalice lighting is written by Barag Diop. Listen more often to things rather than beings. Hear the fire's voice. Hear the voice of the water. In the wind, hear the sobbing of the trees. It is breathing with our forefathers. Hear the voice of fire, calling us to gather together. Please join me in this affirmation, which is on the back of your order of service or projected onto the screen. Love is the doctrine of our church, the quest for truth its sacrament, and service its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth, thus do we covet together. I now invite you to rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our opening hymn, number 52, In the Sweet Fields of Autumn.
Daisies, the tall ferns and grasses.
So, Horizon partners with Meadowcrest Services to make a difference in our local community. And each week, you are invited to bring items for the Meadowcrest pantry, such as shelf-stable foods, hygiene products like shampoo and toothpaste, tampons, etc., and diapers and baby wipes. We do ask that the items not be contained in glass. If you have brought items from Metrocrest, please pass them to the aisles so they can be collected by our children at this time. And now I would like to invite the young and the young of heart to come up front and be in the first row of chairs or, wherever you want to sit. So, our story today really isn't so much of a story, but a lot of mythology and folk tales. Because that's what people used to tell stories about a long time ago. Myths are like fairy tales, a story that didn't really happen, but is based on what people thought was important. And this time of year, what people thought most about was food. Harvesting enough food for them and their animals to survive the long winter when there wasn't a lot of food growing, or in places like Northern Europe, really nothing growing at all. According to the Old Norse legend, there were 3 magical sisters called Norns who wove a tapestry that included all living things: plants, animals, humans, and magical persons too, like dwarves and elves, and gods. And this tapestry could be changed and helped along by doing the right kind of magic, which the Old Norse called sidir. And a lot of the festivals that people had around the harvest times, well, they were a kind of sidir to make good things for the winter time. Now, the first harvest festival is called Lugnasad in Gaelic, which nowadays is spoken in Scotland and Ireland, but used to be spoken in a lot of other places. And the festivals of Lugnasad were about the best harvest and who could make the best stuff from the harvest. So there were baking contests and preserving contests and strength contests and who raised the best livestock. Have any of you gone to the state fair? Well, aside from the rides, all of that comes from Lugnasad festivals. Best pie? Lugnasad. Best cow? Lugnasad. All the food? Yep, Lugnasad. The festival marks the grain harvest, so we get bread a lot. In fact, after people stopped speaking Gaelic so much and became Christian, they called the festival Lammas, or loaf mass, because bread was just that important. It got its own holiday. And beer, because beer was just as important as bread, and Germany still celebrates Oktoberfest in September with beer. Oh, and with weaving and sewing awards, because they also harvested a plant called flax. And flax is what was used to make a fabric called linen, and they sheared all those sheep that had won those awards too, and that was what they used to make wool. And they used that to make warm clothes to survive the winter. And magical wool and flax is what the Norn named Verdanda used to weave the present with. So doing magic to bless wool and flax and grain was a way of trying to make sure Verande kept a really good tapestry for this time of year. Now, the second harvest is the apple harvest, and it was really important too, but not nearly as much fun, because that's just when all the fruits were brought in, and not just apples, so if you don't like apples, you don't have to worry. A lot of fruit was dried and made into cider and juice so it could be stored through the winter. And in the north of Europe, they called the autumn equinox Gleichentag, which means even day. And that's because on the autumn equinox, the day and the night are the same length. And after the people of England and Scotland became Christians, they called it Harvest Home. And it was a big festival where the whole village, kind of like this congregation, got together and helped people harvest fruits and bring in the last of the hay and bring their animals down from pasture and into barns and sties so that they could survive the winter too. And guess what? They did magic for that too. They lit huge bonfires and drove the cattle and sheep between them to ward off evil spirits, or maybe fleas and ticks, and to protect them from any of the fairies who might want to play tricks on them. And they kept some of the ashes of the magical fires to make a thing called lye, which was used to make soap and to help rid the fleas and the animals of those fleas and ticks and other evil spirits. Because magic and the real world, well, they were a lot more intertwined back then. And then everyone did more preserving and putting up stores for winter and waited for the dark part of the year to start. And that brings us to Samhain, or summer's end. And that was the time of year that everything had to be inside. No more harvests, no more gathering apples, and all your livestock was as safe as it was going to be, or otherwise you just left it for the fairies. Or later, the English would say that the devil went around and peed on all the crops that were left in the fields. So they weren't good to eat anymore. But people who knew about the older stories knew that it was the time of Skuld, the Norn of the future, and she used all that was left in the fields for weaving the next season and for seeing to those who didn't survive until the next harvest. So they left a candle and some salt and some grain out for the dead, and they made fires and lanterns to scare off the bad things, and they told stories about their ancestors and their loved ones who had passed into the next world. And they poured out some of that cider for Skuld in hopes that she would weave them a good future and see to their dead. And in parts of the world that forgot to speak Gaelic or Old Norse, well, those days became All Hallows Eve and All Saints' Day, or Halloween and the Day of the Dead. And we carve pumpkins with fire inside instead of lighting fires. And we give candy to children instead of cider to Skuld. And we dress up as our favorite characters instead of telling stories about our brave ancestors. But the magic, well, it's still there. And if we do it just right, well then, maybe we will all get a good winter, and nobody goes hungry, and the future, and that's all of you here, by the way. Whoop. Well, you get to have a better time than our parents or our ancestors did. And isn't that the point of all magic anyway? And the Norns, and the work of harvest after all. Thank you so much. Minds be open to new learning. May your lips ring true into the world. The River, a poem by Alberto Rios. One river gives its journey to the next. We give because someone gave to us. We give because nobody gave to us. We give because giving has changed us. We give because giving could have changed us. We have been better for it. We have been wounded by it. Giving has many faces. It is loud and quiet, big though small, diamond in wood nails. Its story is old and the plot worn and the pages too. But we read this book anyway, over and over again. Giving is first and every time, hand to hand, mine to yours, yours to mine. You gave me blue, and I gave you yellow. Together, we are simply green. You gave me what you did not have, and I gave you what I had to give. And together, we made something greater from the difference. We, that is all of you and me, this congregation, are the church, and it is by our contributions that the church is able to do the work in which we all participate to make this world a better place. We will now collect the offering to support the work of this church in our community and in the world. So when I began this service, I had someone in mind to read this next piece. But instead, I'm going to read this because I have to put a candle and oats and salt on my Samhain altar for her instead. Because for whatever reason, the magic of Verdunde and her sisters, weird and schooled, wasn't enough. And so I have to hope that Skuld takes better care of her. I choose this poem because it was the last one she read for me at another doof service I did 3 weeks ago. It's called After Harvest by Stanley Braithwaite. Faint is the speech of the tired heart to the call of dreams replying, when hope wins home across the fields where the rose of the year is dying. O weary head and heart and hands, look up where the sun is dying. Love leads you home across the fields to the call of the dreams replying. And with those memories in my mind, we now take this time to share our joys, sorrows, and concerns.
Okay, Dawn Taylor and Sammy Audi, our Palestinian brothers and sisters, our hearts are grieving for your suffering. we don't have any others, but we know that there are more that are in your heart that did not come out today. And we're going to light a candle this morning to honor all the joys and sorrows which are in our hearts, but which we're not ready to share.
So I mentioned at the beginning of this that I'm the coordinating officer of Denton Cups. Well, our rituals often start with a group meditation. This isn't exactly that, but as I began this part, I found myself definitely looking back, or more precisely, hearing back. I found myself with Dolores Neighbor's voice in my head. Dolores was one of Denton Cups' founders, and she is now one of our spiritual ancestors for whom we'll be lighting a candle on Samhain. So for this poem by Carly Jo Morgan, let me preface it with Dolores's words. Get comfortable in your chairs with your feet on the ground and take a deep breath. Relax, and if you wish, close your eyes for this poem. Find yourself in a comfortable position, perhaps lying on the floor. Feel the all-encompassing sphere of the earth beneath you. Feel her power. Feel how she holds you, how she holds us all. Watch her vibrant colors slowly desaturate until she becomes a black and white photocopy. She is made of dark and light, as is everything, as are we. Feel her black and white patterns of motion churn within you, the rising ocean tides, the downward crashing of an avalanche, the slow swirl of the clouds overhead, the eruptions of the lava from deep within the core. These energies live within us. The molten lava flows out of our psyche for us to confront, and we must accept the darkness and not just the light. It is the darkness, our shadow, that brings forth our gifts. Feel the harmony of these dark and light counterpoints. They strengthen one another. They bring us balance. They make us whole. You can open your eyes. Take one more deep breath. It's really good for you. You all know which one we're doing. Let's do that one. So Samhain is the last of the harvest festivals, and the final harvest is a time to remember those who have gone before us. Author Portland Jones has put this into his poem, When Samhain Steps In. When the veils are thin, swift growing grain has been scythed to the ground, So autumn takes over where summer leaves off. September sets to and ripens the fruit, daughters of trees that watch over us all, rosy red apples and the brightness of rowan. Make festive the roads that lead to the woods. October drifts in with that final light touch of softer morning mists that blew out each gray day. Dew-bejeweled cobwebs that glisten the way trees clad in dresses fast slipping away. Samhain steps in as the day loses light and the veils stretch thin for those with the sight. So raise up a glass to those who have gone, to keep memories alive that won't fade with the sun. And I believe the choir has a song for us. I love this song, so.
The hour so fair and now so green, known by many names. Feel the pulse of the land that boils within your veins. Someone go down to the holy well and raise the spirits there. Lay a feather on a stone with the flame in the lock of hair, the crane, the wolf, the bear, the boar. No longer dwell upon these shores. You say that the goddess and God have gone, but I tell you they live on in the cities and hills and in circles of stone. The voices of the old ways, the spirit of Albion is calling you home. From manna, wheat, and splashing sea to the Morna Highland glen. From the very hills home of the sheep to the veins of the broad and the fen. Someone go down to the holy trees of oak and ash and thorn. Utter a charm in the voice of three till the summer of king is born. The crane and the wolf, the bear and the boar no longer dwell upon these shores. You say that the goddess and God have gone, but I tell you they live on for the cities and hills and in circles of stone. The voices of the old ways, the spirit of Albion is calling you home. Ride the white horses carved into the hills, walk to the hanging stone. Bow to the might of Sir Narcissus high, feel the peace in the ancestors' home. Someone go down to Wilmington, where the giant guards away. Step into the other world, into the womb, where the centuries pass like a day. The crane and the wolf, the bear and the boar no longer dwell upon these shores. You say that the goddess and God have gone, but I tell you they live on for the cities and hills and in circles of stone. The voices of the old ways, the spirit of Albion is calling you home.
So I begin this with a quote from Reverend Sarah K. Pearson from the First UU Society of Middleborough service, The Harvest. Blessed is the earth which brings forth food for all that lives. Blessed is the rain flowing with the water of life. Blessed is the sun which calls to grow and which speeds our return to the earth. Blessed is the wind that carries the seed, and the mist, the warm and the cool, the new and the returned. May we collaborate and give thanks for the forces that create and uphold life. Is harvest really a blessing, though? Some of you probably are, far better gardeners than I am. But gardening isn't farming, isn't harvesting, isn't the difference between starvation and sustenance that it has been for our grandparents, great-grandparents, and all the generations back when we as human beings stopped hunting and gathering and started growing crops. Farming is backbreaking, grueling daily work, and the chance of utter failure. And isn't it though? The growing season here in North Texas is longer than in many parts of the world, limited by water more than cold. Many years I have planted a small amount of food plants in my garden, onions, potatoes, peppers, and the like. Life has made that impossible this spring and summer, and so I contemplated putting in some fall vegetables. I was deciding if I wanted to plant again for a late harvest or if I wanted to give up, and I was reminded of an old saying I think that I heard from my great aunt, who up through the 1970s still raised her own crops, pigs and chickens. Sow 4 seeds as you make your row, 1 for the mouse and 1 for the crow, 1 to rot and 1 to grow. In other words, plan for uncertainty. Farming is about taking chances and knowing from years and years of work that not everything we try will bear the fruit we hoped for. Sometimes it won't bear anything at all. When the odds are slim, don't stop trying. Increase your tries instead. Our ancestors knew that the work might not pay off, but they did it because they had to, because they had people depending on them. It's a simple little rhyme, really. Sow 4 seeds. But when you think about it, it isn't simple at all. It's about continuing even when you know not everything is going to grow. It helps me to get out of the mental hole of why should I try? Why me? Haven't I tried enough? Well, Cynthia, have you really tried enough? Do you have enough for the coming winter? Or do you need to try a late crop and do it again? Aunt Deli and all the farmers in my family would say, do it again. Better to have too much than not enough at all. Many times, many people and places have gone through the disappointment of losing their crops. Did you know that the year before last marked the 175th anniversary of the Great Potato Famine in Ireland? Crops can fail or be taken by those with more power than you. It isn't necessarily the pigeons or the mice that you lose your crops to, after all. There are many ways for a seed to end up as something other than food for the people who plant it. But loss does not always arise from lack of effort or character flaw either, no matter what the Protestants might tell you. Sometimes things just don't pan out. Sometimes you learn from the mishaps. Plant 4 seeds, and maybe this time, don't plant 4 of the same. Try new things. Try again after failure with the full understanding that there are no guarantees. Maybe plant some peas along with the beans. Learn from other ancestors and plant some corn to go along with it. It's only October after all, and this is North Texas. You could even get some beets in if you try. Maybe I was thinking about Aunt Deli and those beans, and maybe I was thinking about Androck Shoal or the Great Hunger, or maybe I was thinking about my niece, who is moving to Europe because of the horrible political harvest of these last few years and the chances and choices she has lost to them. 3 festivals about the harvest, about planting and working together so we can go forward. Well, there are worse things to try than planting a late crop, trying a new job, building a better place to live, for all our nieces and children, and even for ourselves. As we approach Samhain, the Celtic New Year, the time for ancestor veneration and the time of the final harvest in most of Northern Europe, this year there will be less wheat, less natural gas, and less water in the last half century or more. I am reminded of something an Irish friend of mine posted. Too many people spend their lives being dutiful descendants instead of good ancestors. The responsibility of each generation is not to please our predecessors, it is to improve things for our offspring. It should be more important to make your children proud than your parents. Is that hard to hear? It was for me too. Plant another crop, Cindy. Grandma and her sister's voices say in my mind, in my heart. Plant your seeds, even when you're tired, even when you're exhausted. Do you think we weren't? Take chances, try again, and keep trying. Our inability to control the universe, the wider world, does not mean we are bad or lazy or incomplete. Living life to the fullest, learning and growing requires a certain degree of risk. And sometimes we fail. Sometimes it seems our whole systems fail. But does that mean we stop planting, stop trying, or does it mean simply try again? Getting better at anything from blacksmithing to gardening to being human means we have to start by not doing very good at it. You will fail spectacularly. My grandma used to say, make new and creative mistakes every day. Fail better. And keep learning, keep planting, and do it again. Do the messy work. Farming involves getting covered with dirt and sometimes covered with things more specific than dirt. Fertilizer is a necessity, after all. We make a lot of messes in life, in raising crops, in raising children, in building community. It's messy, loud, and often exhausting, this growing things stuff. Life is messy, or it should be. The abundance of the grain harvest just gone puts us knee-deep in flour or the gluten-free grain of your choice. In the middle of a chaotic rush to bring the harvest home, we pay more attention to what we are doing together than on looking neat and pristine or on creating the illusion of having everything together. A couple of weeks ago, I officiated a hand fasting. We started late, and the sun set before we were done. The wind blew out all the candles, and we had to read the ceremony by a carefully balanced iPhone spotlight hidden in the fall foliage placed about. But hey, we did it. And there was laughter and tears and good wishes for all. In this community, we get messy. This spiritual community, we get messy by being vulnerable and by accepting the range of wisdom and experience and emotion that our companions bring to community. An inclusive community welcomes all people, but not all behaviors. And figuring out how to balance that is very tricky. But if we want to do more, to grow more, to learn more, well, that takes work and making mistakes as an individual and as a group, communicating, setting expectations, showing up and doing the work. Plant 4 seeds, remember? Maybe they're pumpkins. Is how we help our community, our family, and this congregation to be a place of courage and growth. In order to make mistakes, you have to be trying. Doing nothing isn't going to do anyone any good. But oh, doing isn't easy. Communities where people are authentic and complicated, and difficult, headstrong, heartbreaking, annoying. Oh, what do you know? Sometimes maybe we're even successful. And gathering in enough to keep us all going. So plant 4 beans and some corn, maybe a few peas. Make mistakes, get messy, because not doing is letting the famine win without even putting up a fight. Today's service title, that thing we started with at the beginning, comes from a part of a Wiccan harvest rite where the priestess would take a left hand, pomegranate in one hand and an apple in the other. And the apple is cut along crosswise, along the equator, if you will, so that the seeds make a hidden 5-pointed star. The pomegranate is cut laterally, that's up and down, so the seeds show, and frequently is squeezed a bit so that the juice, which looks a lot like blood and is great in firelight, runs down your hands. And the words most often used are some variation of this. Behold the fruit of life, which contains death. And behold the fruit of death, which contains life. Balance, therefore, is maintained. Life and death are equals. And as we move out of the harvest season and into the fallow wintertime, this balance was at the heart of our ancestral agrarian horticultural societies. As we leave the even day of equinox behind us and move toward the coming holiday season, I don't know about you, but I'm finding I'm having a bit of trouble with some balance these days. How to find life when there's so much death going on? How to make peace with death when life is so abysmally uncertain? Did you know that this is the first time in over 50 years that the U.S. has issued a general travel advisory for all Americans going anywhere? They did it on October 14th. Behold, the fruit of life that is death, and the fruit of death that is life, forever unchangeably intertwined, interwoven, making this tapestry of our lives. How many threads have been lost in the last 2 years? The last 3? Too many for me to count here, certainly. Where's the balance on this balance day time of the year? As is the tradition, well, let's start with the fruit of life which contains death, the apple. The apple's been cultivated for about 4,000 years. And the first type believed to have been cultivated was called malice, and today we'd consider it kind of a crabapple thing. Good for cooking, drying, and storing, not maybe for just eating, like we would think of an apple. In many European cultures, the word for apple was used for just about any unknown fruit, plant, galls, and nuts. It appears that the use of the word like this didn't really go out until the 17th century, much like the word corn was originally used to refer to any grain, and not just maize. Tomatoes are a good example. When first introduced to Europe, they were called love apples, and cucumbers have been called earth apples. And then, of course, there's pineapple. And my favorite, the French word for potato, pomme de terre, or earth apple. Apples are at the core of a lot of autumn equinox rituals. Apples in general have been the center of many mythological stories and tales. You know, there's that whole Garden of Eden thing, even if it really was more likely to be a fig or a pomegranate. It's still a myth most of us are familiar with. But if it wasn't an apple in Eden, that would explain why the fruit is mentioned a lot more favorably in the rest of that book. at least 7 times in the Old Testament, where it's referred to as a symbol of God's love, which is weird, if that's the fruit of knowledge, isn't it? Just me. Then there's the golden apple that played part in the Trojan War, and the apples of Idun in Norse mythology may or may not be the givers of eternal life, the way the apples of Hera were in the Greek myths. Apples have been a prized fruit for millennia. It can be dried and kept a long time, pressed and even fermented into real cider, not what we make over here in the US. And therefore was a staple in winter stores. And of course, it's the bane of Snow White, but that's another story for a different witch at a different time. Interestingly enough, in some of the esoteric lore in modern paganism, there's a lot about apples and pomegranates. Apples are the fruit of life, the namesake for the Isle of Apples, or Summerland, the modern Wiccan afterlife belief, which perhaps makes sense if they also contain death. And they do, by the way, contain death, because while they are the fruit of immortality, the seeds, if consumed in too great a number, can be deadly. For behold, the fruit of life, which contains death. And of course, a pentacle, a 5-pointed star, lies at the heart of the apple, made by those seeds of death. And so, balance, I suppose. From a polytheistic perspective, which may be why that apple was chosen to be the fruit of knowledge after all, apples were associated with Aphrodite, Venus, Idun, Freya, Eris, Apollo, Athena, Artemis, Diana, Parona, and Dionysus. All who have something to do with sexuality and wildness. Which of course leads us to the other fruit, the fruit of death, which contains life. And so is the appropriate fruit for Samhain, the festival of remembering the dead and all the magic needed to keep living. The pomegranate's one of humanity's most ancient fruits. It has a long and fascinating history. Although it probably originated in Persia, cultivation quickly spread throughout the Mediterranean and extended to Arabia, Afghanistan, India, and China. The word pomegranate in English is derived from medieval Church Latin, pomum grantium, Jesuits, meaning apple of many seeds. So yes, actually both our fruits of balance are apples of a sort. Because of its exotic appearance and prolific seed clusters, the pomegranate has long been imbued with a lot of symbolic meaning. Indeed, the associations that go around the pomegranate are almost as abundant as the seeds themselves. It also figured prominently in Greek mythology. The ancient Greeks believed that the pomegranate tree sprang from the blood of Dionysus, the god of wine. The fruit is also, of course, associated with Persephone, who, as a result of eating it, was destined to return to the underworld for either half or a third of the year, depending on the number of seeds she consumed in your mythologies. After this period, she came back to earth, signaling the beginning of spring, and the pomegranate thus became a symbol of rejuvenation and eternal life. Behold the fruit of death, which contains life. The peel and pith of the pomegranate are poisonous, and the seeds, as are the seeds of the apple. And yet the seeds of the pomegranate are highly nutritious and very edible. So the inside of one is death, and the inside of the other is life, and vice versa. Everything in balance. Eat a pomegranate and visit a bath, and your vitality will hasten back. That's an ancient Egyptian proverb. Oh, that it were so easy, huh? A pomegranate and an apple of Idun, maybe. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? Eris's apples of discord seem far more prevalent right now, including in the areas where they were both first cultivated, than the apples of healing, Discord and death seem far more prevalent than cooperation and life, don't they? Where then the good harvest of Lugnacid? Where then the balance of Gleichentag? Where then the joy of remembrance at Samhain? Will there be a multitude of blessings of Demeter like the seeds of the pomegranate this harvest time? Or will there only be pomegranate seeds, pomegranate rinds, and apple seeds? Will there be a warm campfire to gather about with friends and share stories and a drink and pour some cider to scald while we remember those who have gone before? Or will there be bombed out buildings and forest fires and ash fields and brine where there once were crops? Where do we find balance in these unbalanced times? There's another part of that Wiccan rite I mentioned way back. Because the priestess, with her fruit of life in one hand and fruit of death in the other, which are both really the same thing, hands one to the person on her left, there you go, Kathy, and says, "Taste of the fruit of life that contains death," and hands the other to the person on her left and says, on her right, and says, "Hail to the taste of the fruit of death that contains life." And each member passes it forward around the whole circle until they cross and come back around. Hand to hand the fruit is passed, and hand to hand the circle is cast of life and death and community, from last to first and first to last. And therein lies the balance and the core of all these stories and all these rituals and all the traditions that they both come from. All life and death depends on the community of the living, this great interconnected web of existence. We are Unitarian Universalists, after all. This great maddening tapestry of knots we call living, because we do not exist alone. We exist in situ, as it were, in zeitgeist, intertwined, interwoven. Poet Bessie Sinnott said, "The tapestry of life continues to be woven, and occasionally a chance arises to repair an older, tattered piece of the weave. With a new, more mature vision, we see the circumstances in the present time and have compassion for the unclear events of the past." She ended her quote with an optimistic, "All is well," that I can't really share right now, but I can see perhaps that in the broader, longer, wider perspective, things may be eventually well. Balance may again triumph over chaos. Demeter's joy at her daughter's return will triumph over the apples of Eris. Won't they? Eventually? If not for each of us as individuals, then for the greater whole, and maybe all those kiddos who were down here listening to the story earlier. Nature abhors a vacuum and seeks balance, or to put in the words of another poet, nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns, so that each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. Long threads mean a lot of time, and I know we are so very much struggling to bring back our communities after COVID. And really, that was only 2.5 years ago now. Our history and the history of the wider interwoven world is full of so many trials that took so much longer and are still ongoing today. See the Middle East. We will, as a group, a tribe, as a species even, make it through this. This congregation will make it through these times of hardship. But none of us will ever be exactly the tapestry we were before they came. The harvests and their festivals will never be quite as fully laden as they were before. Last time I was here at Horizon, that was a long time ago, Reverend Dennis Hamilton used to end each of his meditations with a blessing. "Come," he would say, "let us worship together." I will use the same phrase in a different way here. We gather to worship, to support, and to strengthen each other. Come, let us taste of the fruits of life and death, endings and beginnings, joys, sorrows, journeys, and homecomings together. Let us reweave the tapestry of our lives, with hands sticky with juice of pomegranates and apples alike. May it be so. Oh, okay. Please join me for hymn number 333 in the gray hymnal, "Alone She Cuts and Binds the Grain." We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all who thrive in a just world. Well, you're all already standing, so. As this service, like the harvest, draws to a close, let me quote you something you all might know. How do you pick up the threads of an old life? How do you go on when in your heart, you begin to understand there is no going back? There are some things that time cannot mend, some hurts that go too deep and have taken hold. Well, maybe the answer is, like Frodo Baggins found out, you don't. There is no return to what was, no fixing the tapestry of our old lives. Sometimes we can't see where the threads are going. So we need to keep at it while we live a life we can endure, a life that is loving and resilient and strong. And then after a long season of tending growth and harvesting, are we pulling the roots from a dying age after all? What new tapestries are we weaving with the threads we salvaged from the tapestries that have come before? Those hands stained with flour and apple and pomegranate juice. I don't know, but may our harvest be enough. I end this service with the words we use to end our Samhain ritual at Denton Cups. Go in peace, walk in wisdom, and may the gods walk between you and all the dark places you travel. Blessed be.